In a world without form or function, things come into being and are destroyed. In a world that never existed, we ask, what if? And we watch. And this is Nuff Said. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey, Mozz. Today we are talking, what if Captain Carter were the first Avenger? And there is a lot in this episode. And a lot in the sense that we are told at its outset that the moment that changed everything is Peggy Carter choosing to stay below. Which, by the way, if you ever see the Matt Frewer Time Traveler episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, where he is actually a guy from like the 21st century, but he gets a 23rd century time machine and goes to the 25th, or he gets like a 28th century time machine, goes to the Enterprise and convinces them all he's from the future just so he can steal tech to take back to the 21st century. It's a great episode, but there's one of my favorite lines in there is I'm just here to observe this moment in history. And they're like, what is so significant about this moment? What are you talking about? He's like, I'm just observing, much like our watcher. Mm-hmm. And there's a line in there when, LaForge has a choice to make. He can either come back up or he's going to stay on the planet. And just after he does it, he leans over to Picard and says, and LaForge stayed below. It's like, what are you doing here? But this is the inherent conundrum of the Watcher, which is that he's like, I cannot interfere. Oh, by the way, I always show up at the most crucial moment. So when I show up, you all know this is important. And I make myself visible to you, which I do not have to do. Mm. And that's my way of interfering without interfering. By being this gigantic, bald-headed guy that you see and go, oh, I guess this is important.
Oh, watch out.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing with Uatu. Because, and of course that's his history as a character, is that, his family wanted to interfere. His dad was the guy who said, why don't we give nuclear weapons to primitive societies? What could possibly go wrong? Well, nuclear energy. He said, let's give them nuclear energy. And they did not do well with nuclear energy. They built bombs with it, which is, sad. But then again, that's because there wasn't a political structure in place when they were giving people nuclear knowledge, that there was still a lot of schisms in the society. You have to have that one world government before you can really start to apply technology uniformly across the planet. As long as everybody's worried about, their piece of rock, everyone else is going to be all, oh, gee, well, I need a bigger gun to defend my piece of rock. I got the best rock, so you can't come here. Instead of like saying, well, dude, why don't we just make sure that everyone has good rocks and good water and good air and like maybe not kill each other all the time. But that's another what if. No. Anyway. In this, but this is the thing. So in this moment, and I went back and rewatched the first Avenger just to see how many differences there are, and there are a few, and that is why I say the actual change in this universe is some kind of butterfly effect 6,000 years ago, but it's sort of the thing where things affect other things. And so a lot has changed in this universe, or maybe didn't change in this universe. But by the time that we get to this point, it's like things are already moved forward to a point where this is the thing that's going to make the noticeable change.
Is there an argument
the Nazis
that because of the sudden expansion of all these universes, that the quote unquote computer program had to interpolate these postulations pretty quickly, and it did a good job, but they can't be as sorted out as you would because they came into existence and speeded through their histories so quickly?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I mean, I guess.
Fair enough.
I mean, well, that's the thing. Well, time. time, the definition in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, there's a definition of time.
Ooh,
that definition is the phenomenon that keeps everything from happening all at once. And that is, I just realized.
But sorry, not to get lost on a point, but then what does happening mean?
Well, the point is, that is the question. That is the central conundrum of the TVA, which is a different show. Is because,
but just to be clear, all of these are happening because they follow the events of Loki, correct?
No.
Oh,
the argument is all these events happen. So when you talk about the great multiversal time war, that happens.
Oh, fair enough.
That isn't prevented. It just becomes sort of a secondary aspect of time, where there was a time in which we had this multiversal time war, but it's in that hyper time outside of time when the time war occurred. And then the way that you prevent the time war is you prevent additional Kangs from coming to existence. Now, within that concept, there are still variants.
So wait, are they saying that the previous time war also included the same people as an Iron Man, or were
that would be the idea.
Is that right?
So,
because one would imagine if it happened, the time war happened, thousands of years ago or whatever, it would be a different society of people that it would have happened to. No, or
well, this is the inherent conundrum of, let us say, humans writing stories about the universe, where Earth becomes so much more important in human stories. So,
because my thought is, I understood this as these events are happening with these characters because they were part of the zeitgeist at the moment when this expansion happened. And so all of a sudden, these new expressions are being forced into existence.
So essentially what we're talking about here is the narrative versus a reality within the narrative.
Oh, interesting.
So in the narrative to you and I, as the outside observer, is in our linear time, Loki ends, the multiverse comes into existence. The next story we are told is Agent Carter. However, did Agent Carter always exist in the allowable multiverses of time? Is this a unique thing?
Is that she didn't, and that this caused a sort of extra nudge of one wave that was trying to turn but didn't have enough energy to beat the pull of the bigger wave it was a part of.
That goes into one of the points I was going to make about, as I say, when you watch the Nexus events, you will see that some of them have a higher, and I'm trying to remember the word for it, they have a higher gradient as they go up, that their curve is higher than others. So that you can have a curve that goes up and then comes back down. So, as an example, let us say in this universe, Steve doesn't jump out of the pod, or the person doesn't trigger the bomb early, because that's the real thing that changes in this one. Is the guy triggers the bomb early? Because first he's waiting to see if the serum works. Because if the serum doesn't work, there's no reason to blow everything up, or we can blow it up after, and it doesn't matter. But he gets nervous because he's on the floor, because everyone's milling about, no one is seated, no one is rested. He gets excited and he blows the bomb early before the experiment is done, thinking, you know what, I'm just going to blow it up early. I'll grab a vial. We'll get through it. But because he does that, because everyone's already on their feet, and actually this is an interesting thing, is Peggy was already on her feet when it happens, when the bomb goes off. But the bomb goes off after Steve is created. It's a slightly different, there's a slightly different way that the events play out. And so her staying below causes others to stay below too. Because everyone else isn't going to go up into the, and I kind of felt like that was this like weird social cue that Erskine was getting, which is like, I want all of you people out of my lab. Too many dang looky-loos. Could you all go up in the thing? And by going to Agent Carter, they say, why don't you go up? Once she goes up, everyone else will follow her. But because she stayed below, no one else went up into the observation decks. And that sort of gives you a different social dynamic, which causes the spy to trigger the bomb early. Yeah, exactly. It's just all these things happen. But because of that, because the bomb goes off early, you know, when the guy starts shooting, Steve, being the hero he is, the idiot he is, runs out with literally not even a shirt on his back to go punch him back to Brooklyn, which is something he knows he physically cannot do. And he immediately gets shot in the belly. We also see that that he killed, that of course the guy does still kill Erskine, which I missed the first time because I really didn't recognize Erskine. They drew him way more hairy in this. And that's actually one of the things I really noticed about this. Now that they're all cartoons, everyone has a much more cartoonish voice. Everyone's voice is just a little bit higher and a little bit more excited because they know they're reading for a cartoon.
Right. It's like musical theater versus theater. Almost.
Exactly. And it's an interesting quirk. I don't think it hurts any character. No,
I think that the world demands it.
But you also
the world that they're in, I mean.
Yeah. You also notice it more when you think, because like at first you're like, wait, is that Sebastian Stan? Because of course our Sebastian Stan is like, you know, dour, gritty Winter Soldier Bucky. And this is still Brooklyn Bucky. You know, this isn't even like, I'm trying to take care of you, Steve. Gonna be the grown-up Steve, Bucky that we see just before he goes in. This is just Bucky who's like, what? I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. What happened?
Yeah.
Anyway.
One thing I felt like when this was first announced as a what if thing, the thing that was exciting and interesting to me was that it would have nothing to do with the continuity of all the other things. So it would be a standalone thing. So we wouldn't be burdened by this. We could just enjoy it. And now that sort of I'm getting the sense that they want to make it a part of canon of the central narrative, that it's not just a story on the side that has nothing to do with it. So you have that freedom. You have to sort of think about these sort of things. But that's not really what I enjoyed about this. I think all the lore and whatnot is nice, but just I really enjoyed the Agent Carter TV show. And I feel like this is who she always wanted to be and who she always was on the inside, right? This is everything she was capable of. And to see her get that was really, really fun and cool to see. I think that part, watching that piece of her finally get expressed to its fullest extent was really, really cool to watch. That's what I enjoyed about it most in it.
And along those same lines, what's very interesting is how much of a cold-blooded killer she is.
You know, I've had a couple of people say that to me, but like, would you say that about, you know, any other soldier going out and killing actual Nazis?
No, you wouldn't, but it's different than Steve, who was never a cold-blooded killer. And it's a subtle difference, and it's not to be a negative. That's what I'll say.
Right, fair enough.
You can't look at it as a negative. You got to look at it as like, oh, this is why she's a different kind of Steve. Because Steve's the guy whose first thought is, how do you talk it out? Kind of, you know.
She's more Batman.
She is more, I am here to kill the enemy. Right. You are the enemy.
Because that's what we're here to do. You know,
exactly. And there's no shame in that.
Right.
But it is definitely different than the way, and that's, it's not to say that, oh, Steve doesn't kill. Steve is the first to say, no, I will kill. I will not hesitate to kill you if I need to. But that is not always my desire or my intention. I don't want to. Whereas Peggy is like, I will do the femur breaker on you. I will absolutely shatter your knees and throw you into a burning gas fire because you know what? You're a Nazi and I'm not going to feel too bad about it at the end of the day, even if you were a really nice guy outside of the fact that you were a Nazi, you know?
Right.
You know, Steve's the kind of guy who's going to say, well, you know what, but maybe there is redemption available in their souls. And And Agent Carter is like, well, that's a question for God to talk to them about when they
but
there.
like those are questions you ask before the fighting kicks off. Once the fighting kicks off, you don't have time for those questions anymore.
Yeah. But what I will say it is the difference of someone who was a trained soldier who had fought and done things, and Steve who was an actor who gets put into that moment. So you think about when he first steps into this, he had been, and this is the difference, is that he had been on the War Bonds tour. He did a movie. That is the thing I so much more want from the MCU is what Steve's life was like when he was working with his movie version of the Howling Commandos, who those guys were, what they did. Because I still know that Steve's going to want to do that. I bet you there's saboteurs here. And he's going to take these actors out on this gig,
You think it was like Elvis's latter career with all the movies he was making?
Well, no, I think it's like he was doing these things, but the fact of the matter is, as he's being, positioned as this icon character. And actually, no, there's actually another universe I really want to see, which is the one where Steve says, well, if the best way I can serve my country is going to Palo Gordo so that I can help them recreate the super soldier serum, then that's what I'm going to do. And then he goes there and they crack the super soldier serum and they actually start mass producing super soldiers. But because he is the first super soldier, he actually has amazing sway on the project, saying, no, we have to find people who don't have power. And those are the people we have to give power to. And that's how this stuff works. That's what Erskine told me, that you have to have the psychological preparedness for this serum. So that's the universe I really want to see. But within universe, I would love to see the universe where we actually just get to see those stories where he is just a handled guy touring the country and making movies, and the psychology of that and what he goes through in that. Because for what it's worth, they're probably going to teach him how to shoot a gun, probably going to teach him how to throw a proper punch, how to fall back, how to, do basic stuntman work, Yeah. I want to see a scene with him and the Fall Guy. It'll be great.
Just seems like such a waste. What kind of general says, yeah, we have a super soldier, let's put him on stage, as opposed to,
Well, because he's one. Here's what I'll say. If he just said, well, then just let me enlist. I'm still a good fighter. I don't have I'm not 4F anymore. Just let me go be on the lines. Probably would have let him be on the lines.
Yeah, I guess they would make more money from the movies and the stage work, and they pumped a lot.
Yeah, and it helps the war effort. That's the thing. I mean, what it was in the first version, Tommy Lee Jones is mad because he got a superhero great, but it's not like he has laser eyes. It's not like, it's like, great, yeah, you're a great super soldier. You're going to be a great soldier, I am certain. I got soldiers, I got Hodge. Hodge can do 90% of the stuff you can do, maybe a little bit slower, but he can do it. I got well-trained soldiers, and you're not even well-trained yet. You're stumbling over your own dang feet. Let's be honest here. Yeah. I got soldiers. I needed an army.
Do you think?
I needed an army of you guys. Just one of you. It's nice, and it's going to be great in tactical situations. And obviously, there you have a secondary level where if you had a spy master in the room saying, no, I know what you can do. But honestly, like I said, I think the most useful use for Steve would be the scientific reserve, which I also think that would have been the most useful thing for Peggy is to go to Palo Gordo, not to have been a soldier. Now, what I find interesting is that they still are thinking maybe we can make her a warband salesman. But of course, she's not going to want to do that. And that's the big difference, is that because of her personality, because of who she is, she doesn't want to be she doesn't want to be a dancing girl. She wants to be a soldier. in the same way that Steve did, but she's already been a soldier. She's already been a code cracker for years. One of the interesting things about this is the actor who plays Colonel Flynn. And by the way, I do want to give some shout outs here because we did not do this at the start. We do the IMDb intro, which is when Steve Rogers is seriously injured, Peggy Carter becomes the world's first super soldier. Our director on this is Brian Andrews. Our writers are A.C. Bradley, who is our head writer, Matthew Chauncey, who's our story editor. And then we get to...
Do they list the artists and the animators?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, the artists, no.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, whoever's in charge.
Written by A.C. Bradley, and story editor was Matthew Chauncey. No, they actually, I mean, I'm sure if I get into it, probably if I get deep enough, there's probably animator credits. Film editing was like Graham Fisher.
That's the one of the things I really appreciated about it. I mean, it's an animated film, but it felt really slick. It felt really polished. All the motion action shots were easy to follow, but they were exciting. They were exaggerated a little bit in a stylized way, but in a way that made the visuals musical. You know, It was done really, really well. I appreciated the animation immensely.
So our head of character animation was Joshua Beveridge. Emily Dillion was our animation coordinator. Stefan, Frank, and Adrian L'Alexandre were our animation supervisors. And hardest working woman in show business today, our character designer, Amelia Vidal.
Let's go.
Way to go, Amelia. You designed the hell out of those characters.
Well played.
Well played. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing of it. This whole thing is, I mean, it is beautifully animated. I love the stylized choices they make as far as, when Howard Stark breaks in on the little flirty scene with Steve and Peggy, and he's just like, "Don't mind me," and they do the little wah circle around him and to zoom out. It was some great 1940s direction they did. And again, not dissimilar to what they did on WandaVision, where we're going to embody the storytelling styles of the day. And so in embodying those storytelling styles, we get a nice little tale of what the characters are doing, who they are, and where it's all going. And I do like that. But here's the thing. This is one of the things I wanted to say about our actor who is playing Colonel Flynn, Bradley Whitford, who played Chief Flynn in the Peggy Carter short. Now, the Peggy Carter short was not the Peggy Carter series. Peggy Carter short was effectively everything that's in the Peggy Carter series, but condensed into like one 15-minute episode. So it's like jerky, sexist boss doesn't want to give Peggy her due and doesn't even know why she's there. The war's over. Why aren't you going knitting something? I don't know. What is it women do? She goes out on her own, finds the Zodiac Codex, which is apparently something that looks like some super soldier serum when you pull it out. And then at the end of that, that's when Howard calls to say she's going to be the new head of S.H.I.E.L.D. Everyone wants to say this is non-canon. And I'm going to say, obviously, it probably isn't, but that's what they keep on drawing from for the new MCU. But there is nothing in the moment that couldn't have been tacked on as a 15-minute short in season 3. Like, if you just are willing to say this takes place the third season of Peggy, that once again, after all of the nonsense, she gets reassigned again to this Schmendrick, Colonel Whitford, and it's back to square one for her. But now she is actually so within her own self that she's gonna take the call late at night and just go, well, I'm gonna go do it myself, and I'll do it myself. And she does it herself, And that just happens to be when Howard finally gets senatorial approval to start the SHIELD program. Now, and here's what is interesting within the whole concept. The idea of Hydra worshiping a space god isn't from the comic books. It isn't from the movies. That is totally from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because even if you're reading Hickman's S.H.I.E.L.D. Stories, which are fantastic, where you see how the original origins of the S.H.I.E.L.D. come into existence and how the Brotherhood of Hydra sort of spun off of that, it was never about reconnecting with some ancient space god. That is a purely Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. acknowledgement that they're weaving into this story. Now, when we get to that guy, when they open up the portal, is that Hive? Is that Shuma-Gorath? Fun fact, Shuma-Gorath spells his name in Marvel with a hyphen, as does Spider-Man. So there's something there, too. It's a joke. They always do that. Spider-Man spells his name with a hyphen. And he says, no, I can hear the hyphen. I know how I can hear you pronouncing the hyphen. That's great.
That's funny.
And that's something Shuma-Gorath does, too, in the Marvel Universe to differentiate itself from the original E. Howard Conan books of Shuma-Gorath. So it's crazy. But anyway, getting back to the original story. So that's an interesting aspect of it. And that's another aspect of it, which is that in this universe, the Skull is much more centered on mysticism than science, where he is trying to open up the gateway, not trying to build weapons. But could that be just because Arnim Zola gets pulled out early in this universe, and then the Skull gets to focus on his own mystical view of the universe and his desire to contact gods? It's interesting. In the cartoon, the button he pushes to open up the Tesseract is, a very heavy-handed foreshadowing wood carving of the gate with tentacles coming out. However, in the original movie, he's pushing the eye of Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, to open it. So within and that's an interesting point, because it means they could have said he was calling forth the Midgard serpent. He was calling forth the idea that the Jormungandr was Hydra's champion. He wanted the serpent that could encircle the earth. But they don't. They make a very specific point to make this a tentacle monster and call it Hydra's champion. Which I think is meant to mean that there is going to be integration of the Agent Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. lore into this. They just don't want to play all their cards out first. They want to be very subtle in how they do it, because they want to save that for a surprise, because what's the point of having a surprise if you tell people about it beforehand? And they also want to do it on their own terms. So as they do it on their own terms, it's going to be, so it's like, yeah, in this one, it's a big tentacle hive instead of a little tentacle hive. But you know what? It's movies now. We can afford bigger tentacles. And, as we create this character, it's very different. And notably, and this is the most interesting thing, I actually think all of these stories are going to be in the same universe. I think that T'Challa that we see next week is in a universe with an Agent Carter, not with a Captain Carter, not a Captain America. And the Captain America shield we see, the Hela horns we see, I think all of those are from alternate universes. Because there's another aspect that Benicio del Toro, well, we'll get to that next episode.
Right.
I don't want to get into it because it's like, oh man, it was like, oh, see, that means this, but actually, well, maybe it doesn't mean that.
I like the idea of all the characters, the variables that we're being introduced to, the variants that we're being introduced to, might team up at the end and assemble, which makes me think, is Captain Carter worthy of holding the hammer?
Oh, of course she would be. But we have to see whose hammer it is. It might be Loki's hammer by the end of this.
Oh.
Because there's an interesting person who's missing from that scene at the end with Hawkeye, Barton, and Hawkeye, Nick Fury, and Peggy, and that is Selvig. So if this is being done without Selvig, that when it opens up and Carter jumps through, does that mean that they haven't met Selvig yet? That Selvig isn't a part of this story because in this universe, Loki hasn't come through the Tesseract and taken over? You know, exactly what Captain Carter's presence in this is going to be is the question.
Is she going to run into like a fully formed Captain America?
Well, so here's my big prediction. If we see her again, we're going to also get introduced to a character by the name of Rebecca Barnes, who will be Bucky Barnes' daughter, who grew up on all the legends of Captain Carter. And we're also going to find out if Steve is alive. I mean, the odds are Steve is probably dead because he was sickly to start with. But
in that universe,
with Howard
have been the one to have gotten out of the capsule. You know?
I'm sorry, what?
Whatever universe she travels to, maybe in that universe, Steve is the one that got the serum. So she's going to see, you know.
Oh, well, no, I think it's supposed to be within the same timeline. So when she comes out, that's still the same timeline.
Oh, it's still the same timeline. I thought it was going to be like another dimension or realm or whatever. Because this demon is not coming from another timeline, from another time. It's coming from somewhere.
Well, we don't know exactly where this demon is coming from. It could be, like I said, it could be Hive on some distant planet where the champion of Hydra was exiled. It could be Shuma-Gorath, but then that's existing in a space between dimensions, which you can get to through spatial manipulation like Ant-Man does.
I just thought it'd be cool for Cap to see like a serum Peggy.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, that would be really cool. I mean, that's something that's possible in the comics because there is a Captain Carter who is in the current Marvel Comics universe who did get the serum, but then her universe got destroyed and she came to the current Marvel universe. That's a whole other thing. But my theory is that assuming she's in the universe that has continued on from her initial choice of events, we could get a Rebecca Barnes, which is the young girl. This is the Sharon Carter character. Although we may get Sharon Carter too, because presumably she had a brother who had a daughter, or she had a brother who had children that gave her a niece, that could still exist. So we may get Sharon Carter in this as well. But the idea of Rebecca Barnes to be her sidekick kind of works for me because there's Rebecca Barnes in the comics, who's Becky Barnes, and but to have her as a SHIELD agent, just kind of fulfilling the Coulson role, just being totally starstruck by Captain Carter would be fun, I think. But along those same lines, the idea that in this universe, because things are changing, so much could be different. And exactly whether or not Thor and Loki are in the same place they are in our universe is really up for debate. And the idea of something happening in this universe that changes things between Thor and Loki and what Thor is doing. They've described the Thor episode as a party Thor, meaning a Thor who never went to Earth and got humbled. So and maybe is that
characteristics of Loki?
Well, no, just sort of the bombastic, violent characteristics,
or like the irresponsible one, and Loki ends up being the responsible one.
Exactly. Well, then there's an argument to be made that Loki was always the responsible one. It's just that the only way he could achieve what he wanted was by being deceitful. There's a lot of possibilities for this universe, which is one of the many, many reasons I love this universe. I love what they're doing with it. And I think it's going to expand into some really great storytelling. Any final thoughts on tonight's episode, Maz?
No, I think we got to it. I really enjoyed it. Super
Yeah,
excited.
as did I. I mean, it's a fantastic show. I cannot wait to talk about episode 2, and I'm desperate to know what episode 3 is going to be, because I don't know if they're doing 6 or 9, but there's a couple of them.
They've been picked up for season 2 already, right?
Oh yeah, well, everything's picked up for season 2 now.
Fair enough.
No, actually, Anthony Mackie is doing Captain America 4. That's official. And so that's going to be the continuation of that saga. But Loki's at season 2. This is at season 2. And I think this multiversal stuff is going to be taking over a lot of stuff. We have to see what goes on with the Eternals. There's a guy in the trailer. I don't know if you've seen the trailer yet, that people are saying it's the deviant Crow. But I think he kind of looks a bit like Apocalypse, too. So we'll have to see what happens with that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's subtle, but you could say, you know what? If you wanted to say, we were redesigning Apocalypse, and he has this armor that is completely under his own mental control, how does he utilize it? And you kind of think of tentacles and tendrils, and that could work for it. So it's going to be interesting what this all plays out in the Marvel unified multiverse now. Although, as I understand it, I guess Sony's still doing their own little weird things over there, and we'll talk about that later.
Many worlds theory.
Yeah, well, it's sort of this idea that, you'll have crossover, sort of like when, you would have Petticoat Junction and Green Acres and Beverly Hillbillies cross over, but they were all technically very different shows in the level of fourth wall breaking and craziness that they would do. Where Petticoat Junction was always kind of the grounded in reality show. Green Acres was just a completely nuts show, and then Beverly Hillbillies sort of straddled the line in between, where it was outrageous circumstance, but people accepted it as an idea. So that's a whole other bag of hammers. But anyway, Maz, if anyone wants to talk to you about the Beverly Hillbillies or Green Acres or Petticoat Junction or Captain Carter and her shield, her mighty shield, how can they find you?
Oh, they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And of course, you can always write to me the old-fashioned email way, where ancient mothers and forefathers did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. Of course, follow me on the Twitter as I live tweet things like maybe Stargirl, if I ever remember to do so, or I'm not busy at the time because people schedule podcasts then. At Charlie Hesser. That's CHARLIESSER. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
Equality. Ding.
Thank you, Maz. The story has ended, and yet it continues. We have seen What If, and now we say, 'Nuff said.